On your Friday episode of Locked On Raptors, Gradey Dick looks like he's going to be the Raptors' starting two guard, but will it stick all season? That and more as I continue the best case, worst case series on the Raptors' most important players.
You are Locked On Raptors, your daily Toronto Raptors podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey, what's going on? And welcome to another episode of Locked On Raptors, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It is Friday, August the 30th, and I'm your host, Sean Woodley. I've been covering the Toronto Raptors now for 10, going on 11 seasons on various platforms. You can find all my work over on the Hell website at Woodley Sean. You can find the show on Instagram at Locked On Raptors. And of course, you can join us over on the Locked On Raptors Discord server, a great place to come hang out, talk with pals who like the show just like you about all kinds of things around the NBA. Look, it's August. We're in player ranking season. It's not the most fun stuff, but if you're going to talk about player rankings, the Discord is the place to do it. So come hang out, free to join, link in the description of the podcast. As always, we'd love to see you become part of our listener family over there. Of course, you can find the show for free wherever you get your podcast. Follow, subscribe, rate, review, tell a friend. We're on YouTube as well. You go subscribe there, hit the notification bell button when you do that, and you'll get a push notification every single time the show is set to premiere or go live, which is a wonderful thing. Also a wonderful thing, now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com to get started, and we will get started here on a Friday episode of the podcast as we continue our best case, worst case series of episodes going through all the most key and pivotal players on the Toronto Raptors going into 2024-25 and just kind of laying out what we think the best case, worst case, and most likely case scenarios are for each of these guys. It would be lovely if all of them hit the best case. What a wonderful thing that would be. Of course, that's not how things work, but we can dream anyway. And today we're going to talk about Gradey Dick, who I think is pretty fascinating in this conversation. Obviously, one of the more unknown guys in the Raptors core group of dudes, just by virtue of having played fewer games than anybody else. We know his rookie season had lots of wild ups and downs. There were some really encouraging stretches, some very troubling stretches. He looked very good in the brief moments we got to see him in Summer League before he got hurt this summer, which I think maybe gives a lot of optimism that a sort of better version of Gradey Dick is on the horizon in year number 2. We're going to get into all that, the worst case, the most likely case. But let's begin with the best case scenario for Gradey Dick, because I think if this hits, if Gradey Dick can kind of tap into one of his top 5% outcomes for this coming season, I think it changes things for the Raptors both this season and going forward in a pretty interesting way. I think a Gradey Dick who really hits as a number 13 pick, who comes in and shows tangible growth in year 2 and sort of cements himself as a core member of this team, is just a massive win for the Raptors because of the style of play that he brings to the table. He's an amplifier. He is someone who, if he's really humming on all cylinders, is going to make life easier for all of the better and more important players on the Toronto Raptors, and by virtue becomes one of the most important players on the Raptors if he's doing that. And I think this really all comes down to how he handles what looks to be a starting job that will be his on day 1. And for me, the best case scenario here, just sort of broad strokes, we'll get into some numbers and stuff like that and some specifics, but broad strokes, the best case outcome, I think, this year for Gradey Dick is that he steps in as the starter day 1 and holds on to that job all season. And in doing that, he's sort of, checking all these little boxes that portend even more value to come down the line as the team gets better, as he grows into his body more and becomes a more productive player, as guys who are 19, 20 years old tend to do as they move into their mid-20s. And I think for me, it all comes down to, can he replicate the effect that Gary Trent Jr. had with the starters last season? And can he be on the floor for winning minutes? Can he be someone who's not out there hemorrhaging points just by virtue of being on the floor? He did that as a rookie. The Raptors got smashed when Gradey Dick was on the floor basically at any time last season. And that's what happens with rookies. Rookies lose minutes. Rookies are bad. 90 times out of 100, 99 times out of 100, rookies stink and, cause their teams to lose their minutes out there. So I'm not concerned that the Raptors were really bad when Gradey Dick was out there, especially when you consider that a lot of Gradey Dick's heavy rotation time last year came during the stretch of the season in March and April when the team was an absolutely rudderless mess, and no amount of excellent Gradey Dick performance was going to change the outcomes for that team last year. It was a disaster. It was not real basketball. And through that, there were some pretty encouraging signs from him nonetheless. I think, you know, I guess it comes down to how good you think Gary Trent Jr. was and how hard you think he is to replace. And I kind of come down to the side of, I don't think Gary Trent Jr. is that difficult to replace for the Toronto Raptors. He was a nice player, a cool dude. I had a great time watching Gary Trent Jr. play for the Raptors for stretches of his career. But ultimately, he was not the most impactful type of player out there. And I do think that some of the stuff Gradey Dick does is sort of like Gary Trent Jr. optimized if everything really hits here in year 2 for him, in that, the movement shooting, I think, is just more of a skill that he has than Gary Trent Jr. had. Gary Trent, certainly a really nice standstill catch and shoot 3 guy, someone who could step into a mid-range jumper and sort of bail you out late in the clock. But I don't think he was the kind of guy who you were running around intricate screening actions and having him fly open for movement looks above the break, right? That's just not what Gary Trent Jr.'s bag really was. He wasn't the most fluid dude in those situations. His 3-point looks kind of had to come from a standstill, very squared up, and that was kind of it. I think Gradey Dick has a little bit more in terms of dynamism to the way he shoots. Will that come to fruition here in year 2? Maybe not. Maybe it takes 2, 3, 4, 5 years for him to really round himself into this movement shooter type. But I do think that's the type of player he's going to eventually end up being. And I think that's a more valuable player than what Gary Trent Jr. brought on the offensive end. And then defensively, look, defense is going to be the limiting factor for Gradey Dick here in year number 2. I feel pretty confident in saying that. It was not good last year. He got blitzed. He was in the bottom 5 percentile in the NBA in isolation defense. Small sample, not a ton of possessions, but still, I think that speaks to what we all thought was the concern with Gradey Dick. His strength, his ability to stay in front of dudes who are, pretty big guys, right? Like he's guarding guys on the wing, 6'7", 6'8", 6'9", creative wings at times. That's not a position that he really is going to thrive in, maybe ever in his career, but certainly wasn't something he was going to do well as a rookie. I don't think that's a shock to anybody. Can he make little incremental improvements there? I think he can. And we saw in Summer League, he looks bigger, he looks stronger. We're going to find just how much the power of muscle watch matters this summer, or this coming season with Gradey Dick. And obviously that was a through line of his year last year too. As he got stronger and went through the training regimen the Raptors put him through, he became a more effective player. You would hope that he's only going to continue to grow into his body and bulk up and continue to sort of, just become a more NBA ready athlete. And I think that's, a process that's already started. We saw it again in Summer League. He looked like a totally different guy. And it seems like he's only continued that since Summer League coming into this year from the clips you see of him. And so I think there's a real case to be made that, there's not going to be a drop off from Gary Trent Jr. to Gradey Dick when it comes to defense either. I think the offense, like I said, there's more dynamism there. I think Gradey Dick offers a little bit more in terms of second side creation and passing ability. Doesn't have the tunnel vision that I think Gary Trent Jr. had. And I think ultimately, too, while the numbers suggest that he didn't get there a ton last year, I think Gradey Dick is going to end up being a better rim pressure guy than Gary Trent Jr. was as well, because a lot of his looks come on baseline cuts and things like that, where he's kind of being freed up to run towards the basket. Not something Gary Trent Jr. ever really excelled in either. And then on defense, not to get sidetracked with the offense thing again, but on defense, it's sort of a different style, right? You have Gradey Dick, who's more this sort of sound positional guy, knows where to be, knows the rotations to make. I think he thinks defense very well, but he's not there physically to be this sort of ace on-ball guy or anything like that. Gary Trent Jr.'s brand of defense was a little bit more, all right, I'm going to go and be aggressive. I'm going to hawk passing lanes. I'm going to, poke away for steals. And my value on defense is going to be derived from event creation. That's not what Gradey Dick's bag is going to be, but I do think the sort of trade-off of the aggression of Gary Trent Jr., coupled with his sort of porous on-ball defense as well, that with the sort of more reserved style from Gradey Dick and the similar issues with on-ball stuff, I think it's probably going to be something of a wash on defense, frankly. Maybe I'm underrating what Gary Trent Jr. was as a defender. I think, having watched him for 3.5 seasons, I have a pretty good handle on what kind of defender Gary Trent Jr. is, and I don't think it's a particularly good one. And so I think there's a real chance that the best case scenario here of Gradey Dick stepping in and filling the gap left by Gary Trent Jr. is successfully done. And I think the Raptors starting lineup is going to be a good one. I think there's some low-hanging fruit for Gradey to grab as well to kind of make him more effective than he was last year. The number one thing I look at there as far as the low-hanging fruit is his above the break three-point percentage. He shot 31% of his looks from above the break last year. That was just the frequency with which he shot from above the break. And he only hit 31% of them, which was in the lower half of the league. Not an incredible rate or anything like that, but I think there's room there for at least a few percentage point upgrade there. When you couple that with the fact that he's already one of the best corner three-point shooters in the NBA, he shot 48% from the corners last year, 92nd percentile per clean the glass. If you have a little bit more juice from above the break, plus that corner three-point stuff from those catch and shoot situations, then all of a sudden you're looking at Gradey Dick as a guy who's going to change how defenses have to approach defending the Raptors. And that additional gravity, that additional attention that hopefully he can sort of gain and garner over the course of the first half of the season is only going to mean good things for everyone else in the offense and how it all functions. Once that movement shooter guy is pulling out defenses and making them think and making them have to make quick decisions on the fly out of panic and fear that he's going to bomb a three on their head, that's going to make life easier for everybody else, especially because Gradey Dick has some passing intuition. And so I think that little tiny thing of getting a little bit better from above the break for a guy who is a pure shooter, I totally believe in his shooting talent. He shot 86% from the line. He had long stretches of shooting really, really high rates from deep, 49% in the month of February. I think the true shooting talent is there. And with that, combined with the defense that I don't think is all that much worse than Gary Trent Jr., I think the best case scenario of Gradey Dick being a guy who hangs on to this starting job all year and allows the starters to somewhat come close to the numbers they put up in the limited sample last year, where they were a plus 12 net rating, plus 12 per 100 possessions with the starting lineup with Gary Trent Jr. in the spot that Gradey Dick is going to be in this year. I think that's possible. I think the starters could be very good, and in particular, very good on offense, especially with a little more chemistry, a healthier Jakob Poeltl, another year of kind of learning one another. Geometrically speaking, quickly, Dick, Barrett, Barnes, Poeltl, that should be able to score as a lineup. And I think if they can, it probably makes up for the defensive shortcomings and makes it so the best case scenario of Gradey Dick hanging on to that starting job all year and providing positive minutes when in that lineup. I think it's very much on the table. I would even say it's like, dare I say, one of the most likely outcomes for him this season. I'm pretty bullish on Gradey Dick, especially with his fit, in the context of what this team's going to look like. I went along there in the best case scenario. We do have to consider the worst case scenario with Gradey Dick, as of course, for all the bullishness and all the excitement of having a guy who can shoot the hell out of the ball like he can, he's not really a proven NBA player yet, and it's not always sunshine and roses, and development's not always linear. We'll get into the possible dark underbelly of the Gradey Dick experience coming up in just 1 second as we continue today's best case, worst case edition of the show. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, the #1 sports book in North America. We've been telling you about them for a long time here on Locked On, and now they have something a little bit different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. That's pretty awesome. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season game from Sunday afternoon out of market games all the way through the season. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. Look, I'm not a big football fan, but I know lots of people out there are. There's lots of Bills fans who are in the Toronto area who want to maybe keep tabs on the Bills. Maybe you're a fan of a team like the Tennessee Titans, like I used to be. I'm now a lapsed fan, but I used to love watching the Titans, and it used to be hard to find their games. With Sunday Ticket, it's a lot easier. Obviously, you can just watch all the games out of market and get those 3 weeks of free trial. That seems like a pretty darn good deal to me, all just by betting $5 over at FanDuel. Just visit FanDuel.com and get in on America's #1 sportsbook. Back at it here on your best case, worst case episode for Gradey Dick. Here as we continue on the show, we'll get into Scotty Barnes, Jakob Poeltl, Kelly Olynyk, maybe even Bruce Brown next week. keep an eye out as we continue this series. And before we dive into the worst case outcomes here for Gradey Dick, just a reminder, you can go and listen to Locked On NBA, make it your second listen of the day, the rotating cast of local hosts from the Locked On Network, chipping in there to cover the NBA from a 10,000-foot perspective every single day, covering the biggest stories. And obviously, lots of preseason content coming up very, very soon as we draw closer and closer to the 2024-25 season. Locked in NBA, go check it out. Okay, worst case for Gradey Dick. I think this is pretty simple. He comes into the season as the expected starter and loses the starting gig at some point because they just can't win minutes with him on the floor. That is the worst case here. I think it would indicate a bit of a step back for Gradey, or, at the very least, stagnation. I think it would certainly call into question the sort of defensive viability of a team that has Quickly, Barrett, and Gradey Dick at the 1, 2, and 3. And that's very much on the table. There's a chance this team absolutely stinks out loud on defense, and the sort of cascading effects of having porous on-ball defense at the 1, 2, and 3, if Quickly and Barrett can't take steps there either, that could be a real problem and sort of a long-term fit issue. Maybe it doesn't require sort of moving Gradey Dick out of the plans. Maybe it's something more where you have to look at an upgraded defense in one of the other spots, certainly. But I think there's a real chance that if things go haywire here, we're kind of left contemplating, okay, how is this actually going to look going forward? As optimistic as I feel about Gradey, especially as an offensive player, he is far from proven as a quality NBA player. Again, he got absolutely demolished in the minutes he played last year, plus minus wise. Again, not all on him. A lot of it's on the Jordan Warras and Jamias Ramseys and Malik Williamses of the world. It's not all on Gradey Dick that those lineups had no luck, but even in the lineups where he was playing with, say, Scotty Barnes, those second units with Scotty plus 4 bench guys, most often, more often than not, involving Gradey Dick, those lineups got killed too. It was not a pretty scene. And again, it doesn't all fall on Gradey Dick, and you expect rookies to lose minutes, but you can't have it continue in such a just kind of glaring and awful manner like it did last year. Like, the Raptors had no shot last year in the minutes that Gradey Dick played. And so that's got to improve this year. And look, as much as there were positive stretches of his season last year, there were also ones where he couldn't hit a shot and couldn't stay on the floor. And kind of all of the issues were exacerbated even further. That's possible to recreate itself again this year. Guys who are 20, 21 years old in year 2, it's not just like a divine right that you get better at basketball every year. Development is not linear. And I think there's a chance, as there is with any young player, that there's a bit of a setback here. The sophomore slump is a thing, and maybe it takes a couple of years here for Gradey Dick to sort things out. I don't think if Gradey Dick has a miserable season this year, or he can't stay on the floor for big time minutes, that it means that he can't be part of a long-term solution for this Raptors team. He can't be part of the next good Raptors team, but certainly it makes you feel a little less good about it. And I think, the defensive stuff for him is always going to be the limiting factor here. And there's a chance it kind of undoes him. And look, the above the break stuff is a big part of it too, right? If Gradey Dick cannot hit threes above the break at a clip better than 31%, like he did as a rookie, then that complicates the sort of overall vision with him too, because the grand vision for him is of one of those beautiful off-ball movement shooters who can create all kinds of havoc and problems away from the ball and make it just way more difficult to guard a team than it is when you don't have a guy like that. And if he's not able to draw that kind of attention because teams are not worried about him hitting threes above the break, and he's just kind of relegated to corner 3-point shooter duty, guys who only shoot corner threes and don't do much else are not guys who stick around in the NBA long-term, really, or they're certainly not guys who teams factor into their plans in big ways. And they're thinking, okay, we're going to give this guy tons of money. We just saw it with Gary Trent Jr. One-dimensional 3-point shooting just doesn't cut it. I don't think Gradey Dick is going to end up being a one-dimensional 3-point shooter. I think he's got a little bit more creativity to his game, the way he can get downhill, the way he can work off ball. And I do think the above the break stuff is going to come. But if it doesn't, then certainly his sort of impact as a player is dampened. And there's got to be some concern about the long-term effects there. And then you have like a domino effect too of, if you can't stay with the starting lineup, if the starters are losing and hemorrhaging points when he's out there and they have to go to other solutions, whether it's Kelly Olynyk for extra size or Bruce Brown just for a little bit more sort of do it all, a bit more defense, that type of thing. I think the starters probably get a little bit worse because I do think the best construction the Raptors can throw out as far as a lineup that makes sense in terms of one that can be elite or close to good on one end of the floor is that starting lineup with Gradey Dick in there. But if he can't hang in there, then yeah, you're looking at lesser quality starting five combos. And then you're also looking at Gradey Dick coming off the bench and playing with worse players, which I think is going to be a challenge for him. He's the kind of guy, as I've said all summer long, and I've kind of said since the Raptors took him, he's the kind of player who is an amplifier of other players and who is amplified by good players as well. It's kind of this feedback loop where a guy like him can make it easier on others, and then others can also make it easier on him. And as that sort of spirals and he becomes, oh God, this guy's shooting 38% from above the break and he's making plays when he's, got opportunities or he's being run off the line, that just makes the whole offensive ecosystem that much more effective and efficient. If he can't do that stuff, then all of that becomes a problem, and it becomes even harder if he's doing it playing with bench guys. And, he's only out there with one or two starters at a time. I think, I feel good about the way Grady's going to play off of both Scotty Barnes and Emmanuel quickly, assuming both of those guys get turns running second units. I like the fit with both of those guys. I think Scotty playing with shooting has always been a thing that's worked. It makes a lot of sense. And I think those two guys will continue to have some pretty good on-court harmony. But of course, the defense is a thing. The fit with other players is a thing. And, there could be some second units where it's Gradey plus Scotty and a bunch of guys that just don't really make sense. And that could really, I think, have a negative impact on the development and effectiveness of Gradey Dick as well. That's the worst case scenario. He just can't hang with the starters. And then all kinds of domino effects happen in the wake of that. I don't think that's the most likely thing to happen. I do think I would probably bet on the best case more than I would on the worst case, because I think Gradey Dick's value as a movement shooter is that high. And I think there is a pretty substantial jump from him coming as he's more comfortable in his body, more physical, able to kind of hang with the speed and strength of the NBA game more effectively. But certainly we can't bank on that being a thing because he's not proven. And until he is proven, there's always this chance that the bottom falls out and he just becomes someone who doesn't impact winning in the way I think the optimized version of Gradey Dick really can. We'll come back on the other side. We're going to get into the most likely case, my sort of general prediction for what we're going to see from Gradey Dick in year number 2. We'll get into that coming up in just 1 second. All right, let's get into the most likely outcome for Gradey Dick going into his second season with the Toronto Raptors. I think for me, it is, as has been pretty much the case with all of these episodes we've done, it falls somewhere in between the best case and worst case. That's just kind of how this exercise works. What does it look like? I think for me, the sort of most likely outcome, what I would predict for Gradey Dick in year number 2 is stat lines that sort of reflect what he did in February, where that was his best stretch. And even just like February on, he shot 39% from 3 after February 1st. He, they lost a lot of minutes when he was out there, but he averaged like 12 points, 3 boards, couple assists. I think the assists, maybe there's even a couple more to milk out of there just because of his ability to kind of make that next read after he's been run off the line. And as his gravity increases, those opportunities are going to be there, I think, in more sort of ample volume. But 12, 3 and 2, 11, 3 and 2, 11, 2 and 2, like that kind of feels like the base box score stat line to expect from Gradey. And look, I don't think he's going to shoot 49% like he did in the month of February. I think that's a lot to ask for, but I do think he's going to shoot better than the 36% he shot last year from deep, just because I think there's just, the badness of the start of his career, the just immense struggle, the stretches he went through where he just couldn't hit a shot to save his life early on last year, I think it weighed down his overall numbers pretty substantially. And I don't think we're going to see down spells of that degree in year number 2. I don't think he's going to go 3-4 games without hitting a 3. I think he's going to be someone you can count on to pretty much be in there every night, putting shots up and getting stuff to fall. And even if he's not offering great defense, even if the sort of supplementary creation and stuff isn't quite there, I think just the pure fact that he can hit shots is going to give him some value for this team and keep him on the floor for more than we would see if the worst case situation befalls him. Again, I don't think I'm going to go in and expect him to sort of be this flawless, no doubt. Okay, this guy's a clear, great fifth starter on a team all season long. There are going to be struggles, as there are with any guy who's as young as he is. But I do think that the sort of, again, the best case situation, it probably is more of like a 70-30. If we're going on the spectrum of best case to worst case again, like 70-30, I would lean towards the best case being what actually happens here with Gradey Dick. And I think that probably looks something like he starts most of the games, maybe all the games. And maybe the thing that sort of oscillates is whether or not he's closing games or not. I think he's going to get a chance to close just because his shooting is going to be valuable. And if this team is going to lean into offense, which it looks like they might kind of have to, he's someone who should be out there. He's just one of the more dynamic offensive players they have if he's really hitting. And so I think he's going to close games, but I would doubt he's going to close all games, right? There are going to be situations where his defense makes him unplayable. Maybe there's a matchup he's stuck on that he just can't hang with. Maybe the 3-point shot's not falling and the defense is not good enough to warrant him being out there. Maybe he's in a bit of a slump, something like that. And they need to go to a Kelly Olynyk or a Bruce Brown to close games. And I think that's fine, right? Like, I'm not out here mad if Gradey Dick doesn't go and close all 82 games or every clutch game the Raptors play this season. I think it would be great for his experience, great to get some reps in those situations. But I also think that it's fine to not have him out there if he's not providing tangible positive impact, which is going to happen for a second-year guy. It's not always going to be there. There will be stretches, however, I think, where Gradey Dick really pops off and where he is a clear, no doubt closer for this team because of the offensive dynamism and movement and gravity he brings to the table. And that'll be awesome. I'm all here for that. And I think we'll see plenty of that this season in the most likely case outcome for him. Again, does he close 82 games? I guess if we're talking like clutch games, maybe they play 50 games that are classified as clutch, or 40 games, whatever it is. Maybe it's fewer than that as they get blown out all the time. But let's just say it's 41. Let's say 50% of the games. Does he close half of them? I think that's a success. I think that's great. If he closes more than that, I think you're really happy. And if he closes all of the games in which they're close late in games, I think that suggests that he's doing a whole lot to stake his claim to being one of the key figures of this team going forward. And I do think this year, look, for a second-year guy, I don't think we're in full make a decision mode or know exactly where he fits into the long-term plans mode. You have some runway and time here. But I do think if things really kind of, go in a pretty decent way this year, not perfectly, but if they go pretty well, I think a year from now, we're looking at Gradey Dick as either a guy that they can, dangle in a trade if they're trying to upgrade and, be a pretty attractive piece to somebody else in a way that he maybe wasn't this summer after a strugglesome first year. Strugglesome? Is that a word? I don't know. Maybe it is. Just made it up. That's sort of the outcome here. Or you just sort of look at what he did this year. If he has a good season and things go in a pretty decent way in the most likely kind of avenue here, and you are sure that this guy fits long-term with your best players, right? I think that's a really, if you can glean from this season that Gradey Dick playing with Emmanuel Quickley and Scotty Barnes and maybe RJ Barrett long-term works, I think you are laughing. I think that's a great thing. And again, you don't need to have Gradey Dick come in and be a 15-point-a-game guy who's shooting 43% from deep and grabbing 4 rebounds and dishing 3 assists for him to really, I think, stake his claim as a key part of this team. I don't think anyone's under the illusion that Gradey Dick is going to be some kind of on-ball creative wizard for this team for the years to come. But can he be a really, really high-end role player for you? We might get a little bit of inclination about that this season. And I think if we do it in the positive direction, and it's like, okay, this guy can be a key cog on a good team and be on the floor when things matter, then I think that is deemed a successful season, even if there are some growing pains along the way, which there surely will be, because again, the guy is like 20 years old, even though he has the body of a 17-year-old per Darko Rajakovic. Very curious to see how old they think he looks when we get to media day. Someone's going to have to ask that question. And hopefully it's more than 17 and a half. We'll leave it there. Thank you so much for hanging out and rocking with the show all week. We'll be back again next week to continue best case, worst case with our regular rotating cast of guests and all that good stuff. In the meantime, follow, subscribe, rate, review, tell a friend. Much appreciated when you support the show. However it is you choose to support the show, you're all the best. And we'll be back after the long weekend. Enjoy Labor Day. Have yourself a great long weekend for those who are lucky enough to have it off. And if you don't have it off, tell your boss, I'm not working. It's Labor Day. Anyway, we'll talk to you again next week. Have a great weekend. Support the show. Follow, subscribe, rate, review, tell a friend, all that good stuff. And we'll see you soon. Thanks for hanging. Bye-bye. Oh, did that go in? I don't know. We'll bring it to video replay.